Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Find My Past Fridays. It's that time again. We're back to talk about all of this week's new releases and to gather together and talk about all things family history, which is the thing that we love most. Welcome. And do tell us where you're tuning in from. I'm tuning in from sunny Edinburgh, and we've got some wonderful new records to talk about this week, as well as just to catch up with all of the things that you've been doing too. I know we had a bit of a chat on Wednesday, talked about our family history Q&As, so it's been really good to speak to you then. But definitely, and I know Anya's already noticed that I've got a special guest with me at the moment who is hanging out with me. This is Woody, who will probably raise his head at some point, but he's the decorator's dog who I'm looking after at the moment just while we're hanging around. So he's going to be our family history hound to help us sniff out those clues that we need for the answers that we want. I see everyone coming in now. I see people from Australia. I see people from Massachusetts, Bedford, Shropshire. Oh, fantastic. That's great. I've got some family in Shropshire, Rosie, and Utah and everything. Yeah, exactly. We've got a mascot for the day, which is great. Northern Ireland, Essex, Leicester, Surrey, Somerset. That's brilliant. Excellent. That's great to see you all here together, all gathering and talking about family history. We had a great question of the week, which I'll say again, and maybe you can think of things, put them in. We'll talk about that a little later once we go over this week's new releases. So the question was, and it's a really interesting broad one that I get really excited about, even if you don't have relations from there, which historical times and places interest you most? So that's a very broad one. There are, imagine, thousands of different places that could fascinate you. So definitely tell us what you get really excited by, and we'll talk about that, maybe share some historical stories. That will be really, really exciting. I see Pat saying that she thought the badger had been resurrected, because I used to have a badger in my old house, which was, I think it did appear on a couple of very distant past Find My Past videos, but no, this is a black and white, yes, but no, it's a Cocker Spaniel. But yes, let's talk about this week's new releases as we get started. It seems that everyone is here now, and if you're not, then don't worry, you can catch up on this as well. So we've got some military themed releases today to talk about. We've got the Britain Campaign Gallantry and Long Service Medals and Awards. So that's a collection that covers those people who've been awarded medals in a number of different conflicts and expeditions. So we've got the Indian General Service Medal, those people who served in India all the way up to the Second World War from the 1850s. We've got the China War Medal, very small period in history, but very interesting, 1900. The Second China War Medal, there you've got another one. And then the General Service Medal, 1918 to 1962, for all those who served. So that could have a lot of people who might have acquired that. And then the India Medal, 1895 to 1902. So you can focus on individual medals, or you can search the whole lot for anyone that you have served in the military. Really worth doing. And that can give you a lot of extra detail, like service number, rank, regiment. And that's really good. Perhaps if we're looking for people whose service records we don't get hold of, we can use this extra information to try and narrow down and work out exactly who's there and who we can use to use some negative confirmation to see if we've got the people left that might be our ancestor, and see if we can get through there. And if you have a service number from a service record or from some other record, use that, and straight away you might get to the record that you need. So really, really useful there too. And then we've added some more records to our British Army Service Records collection. It's absolutely huge, and it doesn't just cover those First World War service records that you might know and you might have used. It covers records going all the way back to the 1760s, records from the Napoleonic Wars, the Crimea, other different places. All of those things are really, really interesting. And then, of course, you've got people who served at Waterloo, and you've got people also who went further forwards. So people going all the way up to the Second World War and beyond. Not as full service records in many cases. Sometimes they're attestations, sometimes they're different things like that. But there are some. And so we have some from now. The new release is the Scots Guards. If you've got ancestors who were in the Scots Guards, you really need to take a look at this, because it can include even photographs. And that's what's really exciting. So you can have a little passport photograph of your relative who served in the Second World War. And that's amazing. That's really cool to see. Any record with images like that, grab with both hands and take a look. The records, they go from a couple of pages all the way up to hundreds of pages and their whole service history. So whenever you see that little film strip at the bottom, you can move up or down, keep going through it until you see different names, or perhaps if the thing ends and you get to the last page. You never know what extra things you might find in there. So it's really, really useful to make sure that you've interrogated the whole thing. Really important. Then Norfolk Churchyard Graves and Memorials. There are lots and lots of photographs of various different cemeteries around Norfolk. Really good for those of us who can't get there, particularly in the current climate. We can take a look at cemeteries and we can see the memorial inscriptions of all of these people, which is a great thing because that means that then we can get all that extra information. Monumental inscriptions, memorial inscriptions, they are really useful for getting back that little bit further with your family history. So you definitely should grab hold of those as well and interrogate them as much as you can whenever you can to get some extra detail. You don't just get the names and dates, you'll get relationships, you might get where they live, you'll get perhaps that they're a mother, grandmother, you might find out that they're married to someone, you might find the name of that person, dates are there, where they worked, what they worked as, all of these things, maybe even some stories might be really interesting too. Really very valuable. Then of course newspapers. We always love our newspapers, and we have some new newspapers and some expanded newspapers. Don't forget though, when you have new newspapers added, these stories can be syndicated. So go and look at these papers, even though you may not have ancestors from that area, because they may still be covered in these news. So do remember to regularly check back and search again and again with the same criteria. We have 6 new newspapers. England, Scotland and Ireland get a taste. The Ballina Herald and Mayo and Sligo Advertiser, the Beacon of Edinburgh, the Beacon of London, the Glasgow Courier, the Midland Mail, the Weekly Journal of Hartlepool. Those are brand new titles. And then we've got new coverage in the American Register from 1895, the Argus, or the Broadsheet of the Empire, it sounds exciting, 1841 to 1843, the Barnsley Telephone from 1918, the Blandford and Winburn Telegram from 1885, the Bridport, Bayminster and Lyme Regis Telegram, 1881-1886, the Glasgow Sentinel, 1821 to 1823, Lancaster Standard and County Advertiser, the London Daily News, the Lynn Advertiser, the Nelson Chronicle, Colne Observer and Clitheroe Division News, the Northern Weekly Gazette, the Pictorial Times, which is a very early paper with illustrations in, really interesting to take a look at, even if those people just have social history of an interest. Pierce Egan's Life in London and Sporting Guide, The Age, the Weekly True Sun, which is better than the Weekly False Sun, which we don't publish, of course, and the Weymouth Telegram and Etist from 1884, which I imagine is a Welsh title. So a huge amount of extra coverage this week, as we always do on some great new titles and expand what we have. Really, really useful. Those newspapers we can't get enough of. And every week there'll be new releases to really help push you further with your family history. I can't wait to talk about the releases next week. I'm not sure who might be on. I think it might be Alex or so, but next week there's a bumper crop of wonderful records that I've been working on just today, and they're very, very excited to see what you make of those. So look forward to seeing those reactions, and every week if you come and join us, you'll find out first of all. Make sure you subscribe to that newsletter as well, and you'll get an email sending you a big update, a big list of all of the different things that we've released for that week. So let's take a look at more of these people asking about the question of the week. And I see a few people also making a note about their relatives in military records. Terry Rooney has said that their grandfather was part of the Forgotten War, the Korean War. They may have some details in here, and there are some other records that go further forwards that aren't service records that might be of help as well. So I would definitely take a look at our whole military collection, see if you can find some information there, Terry. And let's see, we've got Andrew said, have we got any Grenadier records? Yes, we do. We've got records from all branches of the military, all regiments, all services. Take a look. Start with the big military search and then narrow down and see what you can go through. And depending on the time period you're looking for, you might find something for you. Okay, let's see. Beth is excited about the military records. Woohoo, that's great. Emily has said, do I see a dog? Yes, you do. And I'm going to move the camera a little bit. You don't need to see me so much, but you can see a little more of the dog. But so there we go. Maybe he'll get more excited at some point, but I'm wary because if he gets more excited, I don't know if I'm going to be able to control him. He's a spaniel, as you know, they can get quite excitable. And I see more people saying hello. You've joined us. Welcome, welcome. And some comments about the question of the week now. So a lot of people are interested in different things. We've got here Rosie, not a particular period, but they're really interested in lightermen and watermen families on the Thames. That is one of those really interesting professions, occupations that you see generations of people doing the same work and going through. It's really quite interesting, particularly as they tend to live near the Thames as well. And you can see this little sort of culture independent of the rest of the city coming together. So that's a big thing. I see some more exciting things here. Jane has said the Glasgow papers, they might find their grandfather. There are lots of papers from Glasgow and a little bit around that area, so definitely take a look in our papers, not just the new ones. Sam has asked when World War II records are released. That's a good question. I think you mean the service records at the moment are still with the Ministry of Defence, and there's no real news yet as to whether they'll be released to the public at any point. But at the moment, if you are next of kin or related to someone, you can still apply for those records, and I definitely recommend that you do. It takes a while, but they'll go and they'll scan the record and they'll get it for you and they'll give you a copy, and that can be full of lots and lots of detail. Anya has got a waterman in her tree as well, and tons of miners. David has said, any CCS records from World War One? CCS, you might have to enlighten me on what the CCS stands for. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's because it's a Friday afternoon. I'm not sure. CCS, Canadian something, perhaps? I'm not sure. So rather than guess, because that would be wrong with me. Casualty Clearing Station. There we go. Alex has got it. There we go. This is the thing. Alex is in the comments, and it helps to have some extra expert knowledge behind me for the little bits that we all don't know everything. So that's good. We've got lots of medical records, yes, and they are from World War One. So take a look at that collection. It's exclusive to Findmypast, and that is really worth looking at. And not a huge comprehensive collection because many of these records were destroyed after they were used, but we have the surviving records, so definitely look at those too. And we're seeing some more. Moira is from the original Washington, so that's in Lincolnshire. Am I right? I'm going to tell me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong. My knowledge of English geography is rapidly decaying as I learn more and more Scottish towns. But let's see what else we've got. So I see here in the 80s, I was visiting a disused granite quarry, Stony Cove, to do some scuba diving, only to find out my great-grandfather was blown up and killed there working as a quarry foreman in 1916. Wow, that's a connection, isn't it? That's a big connection. That must have been a really emotional moment. That's something to really dig into. And especially maybe go back and see it in a new light, which is another thing. I see Jane is saying that she's really interested in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So much change happened. That's really true. The Victorian era made life so different for all of our ancestors. All of our ancestors started in a completely different place before the Industrial Revolution, and they all ended somewhere else, regardless of if they'd never moved house. The amount of time that they may have had to work, the amount of money they might have earned, the technology around them, the way that society was structured, all of that was affected by the Victorian era and the Industrial Revolution. It's one of my favorite periods to study, and I really like the Georgians as well. The Georgians are very, very exciting. Janine has said they love the time when the old world starts to give way to motorized vehicles, telephones. People latch onto them with no hesitancy, and that's even true today. The latest gadget, the newfangled contraptions, I think everyone has grabbed hold of. I've always been a little fascinated with the start of the First World War, and it's sort of like the old world hitting the new world, isn't it? It's back then, before then, you'd had people arranging to have a battle, and they'd line up and they'd fire at each other until they decided the battle was over. Whereas now you had this mechanization and terrible industrialization of war, which meant that millions of people were then fighting instead of a few thousand. And it's something that I think people weren't prepared for. They thought it was going to be a grand adventure, and then quickly realized it wasn't, and got a little bit afraid of what they'd unleashed when we see cavalry charges against machine guns. And there's that really somber picture that you might have seen of a German soldier. He's got a gas mask on, and so has his horse, and he's got a lance. And it's kind of really the epitome of old world and new world mixing together. And that fascinates me so much. I think that's a really big thing. It's like the last gasp of the old world. Something about the Napoleonic Wars seems very civilized and noble, and then in the First World War you have the Christmas truce, where people played football on Christmas Day between the different sides, people trying to be friends, and then just everything falling apart and becoming a little bit more dark, and the world didn't really see that light again after that. So that's something that's really, really fascinating. Linda is interested in all things Tudor, especially Henry VIII, and also those two world wars and the Boer War. Henry VIII and the Tudors are very fascinating, aren't they? That sort of absolute power that those monarchs had, and that they could change the world for better or for worse just with the stroke of a pen, all the different things that happened. Henry VIII definitely changed the world. Imagine the things that would have happened otherwise. I'm quite into something called counterfactual history, which you can get some books about, you can read, and it's always that if some little thing didn't happen, how would the world be like, or what would have changed? And that's always interesting to think about. And they're definitely interesting to play around with those hypothetical scenarios. And I see Linda's also interested in the 1880s, same, that Victorian era, very, very important, very big, as we said. Anya's studied Celtic and Anglo-Saxon studies along with Scandinavian history. Vikings across Europe I find interesting, and the early medieval period. Poor Linda Robertson had me showing off my knowledge yesterday. You should never be ashamed of knowing things. That's a big thing. If you know stuff, that's great, and you should be proud of it. And if anyone tries to make you feel bad about it, then you're not with the right kind of people. You should come here and you should tell us about all the things you know, because we all appreciate it. So that's great. It is fantastic to see people enjoying things and geeking out on those wonderful topics that we all can together. The Vikings are really interesting, and their stories that they tell, the way that they tell stories and their myths and legends preserved in such a way. And we don't really have any original contemporary tales of the Vikings. They're all recorded from a century or two later and going back, and they've been passed on orally, and they're kind of designed that way, but means we don't have that much. And it's like, I read a book about this a while ago, and that learning about the Vikings is kind of like, with the amount that's there, learning about Greek mythology but only knowing about Hercules, because there's so many things that we sort of know a little about, we don't know anything about. It's like there was a Viking goddess of love, and we know her name, but that's it. And if you can imagine how interesting and fascinating and the stories that must be involved about Viking love and the Viking goddess of love and how cool she must have been, and we just know her name, and that's it. And so we've missed out on some of this, lost to history, and that's fascinating. It's really interesting. So the stories that we do have are very interesting. Stories of Utgaloki and all these other things, and the trickster gods and everything else is fascinating to read about and to learn. So I'm very with you on that. See what other people have been going for as we scroll through, everyone chatting away, which is exciting. Linda quite fancies the exhibition of shoes from the 1700s to present until September in Bath. That could be interesting. That's a good one. One thing that I think is forgotten sometimes is a lot of our ancestors didn't wear shoes. They would fold rags, and they would fold bits of cloth around them, and they would use bits of twine and bits of rope and string to hold these rags to their feet, and that happened quite a lot. So it's definitely something to see. Maybe it would be the middle class and the upper working class that would have shoes, but I'm sure there's a lot of personal style that goes in, just like it does today, and we see lots of different things expressed in people's fashion. Fashion is a big one. Matthews likes all the royal houses. He thought the same as the Tudors. They're in power, and those in power always tend to think they're right. He likes the Plantagenets. The Plantagenets are very much the real life Game of Thrones, aren't they? It's crazy, the War of the Roses and the ebbs and flows of the grand noble families, and that's something that is really, really interesting. There's a book called She-Wolves, which I quite like, which is about women in that period, and there were very, very strong women who basically ran the show behind the scenes. There are a few that were very, very fascinating, Eleanor of Aquitaine and others, and they are really interesting characters. So I do like that period as well. Really, really interesting. Nicole really likes Greek mythology ever since they read the Percy Jackson series. They've been liking reading up on the mythologies and where they came from, and one of the greatest places for Greek mythology is Sicily, because of course Sicily was part of Greece at the time. And so if you ever get the chance to go to Sicily, there's a place called the Valley of the Temples in Agrigento, which is the place it's the largest UNESCO site in the world. It has the biggest number of intact Greek temples as well. And there is where all kinds of Greek myths and legends took place. It's the spot that Icarus fell to earth. There's a statue there to commemorate that, and there are other things as well. There are the Colossus there laid down as well, and all these different things, or Colossi it would be as it's Greek. And it's a fascinating place, walking through that valley and seeing the temple to Venus, the temple to all these others. I think Venus was Roman, isn't she? I've got the wrong name. I'm too Italian. And yes, so even Woody is disappointed in me for getting the wrong goddess. But definitely there are some great temples there, and it's really interesting and worth taking a look at. So there we go. So Matthew said as well, the Plantagenet women with the real power behind the throne. Yeah, Eleva and Aquitaine especially, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, definitely really, really agree with that. And really interesting to see the interplay between that. And a good comment. So Venus is Roman. Yeah, Aphrodite, that's what I was looking for. Thank you, Nicole. I can always trust you guys to keep me honest, and that's good. So thank you for filling in. And then Joan has visited, so she's been there, so it's definitely a lovely place, and I'm glad that you've been able to share in that as well. Maybe at some point when we're all able to travel again, everything's back to normal, we'll have to arrange some kind of big Find My Past trip to go to all of these places around Britain or around Ireland or somewhere else, so we can go and do some family history, and we can also see all these fantastic landmarks and see the history between all these places. That'll be really, really interesting. And let's see what we've got here. So a good point from Alex, who said there's something quite disheartening about the fact that war has been one of the main drivers of human innovation and technological advancement through history. It is quite strange, isn't it, that war moves technology forwards, and lots of the reasons for the things that go on have been military advances that have then been co-opted and become civilian technologies and things. And it's strange that they have war to, I don't want to say thank for, but war has created our world for better and for worse. It's very, very interesting. And Cindy has said that seeing the Roman shoes they uncovered at Vindolanda by Hadrian's Wall was fascinating. I think they've got a big museum there now, haven't they, of all the different things they've found along the wall. And I've seen some stories about the African soldiers that were posted at Hadrian's Wall, and all the different people from all the different corners of the empire that were there as well. Very, very interesting, and really, really different from wherever they grew up. I know that sometimes they'll find Roman cemeteries in the Dark Ages, and they'll use the carbon dating, and they'll look at things, like the teeth, and they'll go inside and they'll be able to tell the sort of diet that people had and where people grew up. It's very clever technology, but that extra technology, we can see people that have come from all over the world. Even back in the Dark Ages, there were people from around the world that were coming and living in Britain, and they were there and settling in and perhaps having quite interesting lives that we'd love to know more about. So that's fascinating to see. And I see another great thing to watch as well, suggestion, Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old, a true masterpiece and one of the most remarkable things ever watched. That's really true. I saw that. Something about that old footage as well, when you start to smooth it out, it comes to life, isn't it? It almost seems real. And it was really good the way that Peter Jackson's work added the voices and things and made it a bit more real. I watched 1917 a while ago, and I think that's just an amazing film as well, that really sums up innocent boys basically going to war and trying to make their way through, and that's really interesting film to watch too. I've also just this week watched Kingdom of Heaven, the long version, for the first time, which I'd never seen, and so now I'm a little bit obsessed with the Crusader states because I'd not really thought or known too much about that, and so I've been very interestingly learning about Baldwin IV, the Leper King, and Guy de Lusignan and Renaud de Chatillon and all these other people, and it's really, really interesting to find out about the Battle of the Horns of Hattin and Salahuddin and all of these things. I did study Dark Ages Islam when I was at university, and it was a beautiful period in time that's really interesting. all the things in history that the Greeks and Romans knew that were possibly lost in the Dark Ages, which we shouldn't call the Dark Ages now. I've been told off by a scholar friend of mine that we should call it the early medieval period, because it was anything but dark. It was full of culture and history and all kinds of rich detail. But if there's something begins with an AL, like algebra, alchemy and things, then it was preserved by Arabic knowledge, Arabic scholars, Arabic poets. It was a beautiful time of great high culture. And there's a great story I know from the Crusades, where there was a Crusader doctor and a Arabic doctor, and they went to a hospital in Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, the Arabic doctor was prescribing things to cure these wounded soldiers. And there was a wounded man who'd been hit with an arrow in the arm. And so he made a poultice and put this poultice on this guy's arm, on the wound, and prescribed him a diet of certain herbs. And then the guy started to heal a little bit. I know, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's a big story. And so the guy started to heal. He started to get better. And there was a knight with a sword wound, did the same sort of thing, kept going. And then the Christian doctor, the European doctor, came and cut off the arm of the guy with the arrow wound, and prescribed leeches for the knight with the sword wound. And all of these people that he treated died. And it was interesting how there was a very different understanding of the world from these things. And now we've brought things back together, but it's very interesting. And I do like, there's a great poet called Omar Khayyam, which is great. He's from the same period, and he has a great poem, which I might get right. So, if the wine you drink and the lips you press begin and end as all things begin and end in, then yes, drink, for today you shall be the same as you were yesterday and will be tomorrow, no more, no less. And it's wonderful, the great poetry, art, science, all this stuff in the period. So Dark Ages Islam is great and really interesting to look at. Early medieval Islam, and you see even in today's world, so Gibraltar is named after Tariq ibn Ziyad, who was the guy who conquered it for the Almohads in Spain. And so Jabal al-Tariq is the mountain of Tariq, who is the guy who was a slave that was supposed to be gotten rid of by told to go and conquer Spain. He said, here's a few hundred men, go and conquer Spain. And then he got to Spain, landed, burnt the boats, told everyone, there's no going back, we better do this, and took advantage of all the divisions in the Visigothic local tribes, and then actually did conquer Spain. And he sent a message back going, oh, done it, now what, sort of thing. It was fascinating, really interesting time in the 700s. And yes, and so definitely I'm going to get lost in that, and we've got more to talk about, but I really recommend learning a bit more about that. And we see some more questions and answers. Ali researched a military history of World War I soldier for a visitor to Fife Family History Society. It was his grandfather who was an engineer. She now actually lives in the same cottage that he grew up in. Wow, that's a real small world thing, isn't it? Really interesting. Katie said Prince Henry Sinclair and the Venetian brothers, the Xenos family, who came out of Acre and went to America and brought back maps. Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting indeed. I'm seeing everyone going through. We're seeing, Anya saying the Ibn Fadlan's accounts on the Rus and their burial rites was fascinating. The Rus were a kind of the original forefathers of Russia, as we know Russia there, but they were a Viking origin, so very, very interesting culture there as well. Daphne likes Mary Beard's programs on classical history, and that's a great starter if you want to get hold of Romans or anything like that, because she's really, really compelling, really interesting. I really admire people who can bring this down to the level that it can all be really understood easily, because some of this can be very, very complex and technical. And if you can find someone that can do that, then definitely recommend them, and maybe we can see and watch their shows together. A good new Roman site, Pat saying, has been discovered in Scarborough. Developers have undertaken to protect it during development. So that's really, really good. It's nice when they do that. I know in Rome, there's a Roman road that goes through an IKEA, and I have a photograph of that, and it's really, really strange because it goes right through the car park, and they've sort of put a bridge over it so that the road is still there, but it's right in the middle of an IKEA car park just outside of Rome. So it's really, really interesting how history has been kept. And one of my favorite things is I've got a lot of cousins and an aunt in Verona. And Verona has an old, the porta, the gate to the city, the Roman gate, still preserved. And they've still got the the cobbles of that little road, and the road cobbles there have been worn smooth by all of the cart wheels that have gone over, and you can see the what do you call them, the grooves that have been made by the cartwheels over thousands of years going through this single gate, and it's amazing. I put my fingers in there and just felt and just imagined, the amount of millions of cartwheels it must have done for thousands of years, and all the things and people that must have gone through there, and you just feel a little closer to history, don't you? It's amazing. So let's see what we've got here. Margaret saying, don't forget Bethany Hughes. Yes, very true, very true. I like Susanna Lipscomb as well. She's very good. And what's the name of the one that wears the costumes? She's quite good as well. She's on the TV, does a lot of royal programs too. I'm sure that name will come back to me. And of course, Dan Snow, because we know Dan Snow is a friend of Findmypast, and it was great fun to talk to him, but he's very good at doing the same thing, making everything nice and easy to understand. So I've got quite into his podcast, as well as being on it. I like to listen back, and I really enjoyed some of the ones that he's been doing. And Lucy Worsley, that's right, Shauna, yep. And so there we go, and Linda as well got there, Lucy Worsley, and there's quite a few, and of course Horrible Histories as well is very good. It's designed for kids, but I think it's good for everyone. I think it's really interesting and a great way of humanizing and bringing things so that we can all understand it too. So that's another great one. And we can't have family history without a bit of history, and that context and understanding of how the world came to be is really useful for family history and really great for our records. And if you know how things were going on, you can sort of ask what your ancestors were doing at the same time, which is interesting. We might never get to find our details of Roman ancestors. We might not have a paper trail, but we are most likely all descended from them, and so it will be very, very interesting to know that our ancestors were some way involved. Alice said HBO's Rome was amazing. Travis said they didn't get a third series, but I believe it was just too expensive to continue. And I know a fact about that program is that they were told they weren't going to get a third series midway through the second series. So if you watch it, the first series is very, very slow and very nice, and one of the really most interesting displays of how Romans fought. There's a really good scene that explains it, and a lot of things they do. Interesting with culture and context. But then they planned for 5 or 6 series, and they were told they were only getting 1. And so they jammed everything into that little series. So the second series is quite fast paced and doesn't make that much sense. But the first series is a masterpiece. It's very, very worth looking at. Rosie has mentioned Omar Khayyam as well. If you Google the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, it's a brilliant book. It's one of my favorites. You should find the poem I talked about. My mum used to quote it a lot. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. Very, very moving, very, very great poet there. He's a wonderful man. And let me see. Karen has made a point. Family history research is great until you try researching Cypriot family trees. There's always a part of the world that you always feel both lucky and unlucky to have ancestors from. And I know plenty here will have Irish ancestors that they will be very proud of, but also thinking, I wish they could have just been born somewhere with more records I can get hold of or something like that. So I feel your pain with some Sicilians and some Maltese ancestors, but hope is they're always there and at hand. There are always ways to find people, and always more records coming online at all times. So don't give up. There are definitely ways to get to the end, and just always keep looking, and just put it on one side, maybe work on another part of the family tree, and do come back to it. And we've got so we go. Matthew said Lucy Worsley programs are always interesting, entertaining. They are. I've seen quite a few of them, and see what we've got there. And Karen's son loved Horrible Histories when he was younger. His teachers were impressed with his knowledge from just watching it. It's hilariously funny too. That's the thing, isn't it? It's the way that you can teach someone without them knowing that they're being taught, which is the good bit. Because I used to hate school. I could never understand it. I never did very well. And as soon as there were things I was interested in, though, whoosh, I was away, and it all just went in like a sponge. And so that was the moment for me, especially when I had a chance to do my first family history project at about 11 years old. And that was, I think it was many hundreds of pages bigger than the next person along. And I was so excited. And that was when the bug was bitten, I think, some more. But definitely, it's a really good tool, Horrible Histories, for getting people in on your like Sir Tony Robinson, Blackadder, Maid Marian and a Merry Men, and All Things Time Team. He's done some great special shows too. He's done some good ones too. And David is doing Ireland now. He says patience is a virtue. It is. Patience is the one thing to think of, I think. I know that there's the Irish Family History Research sort of session that goes on just after this one on Friday, so that's worth tuning into as well. And we do have some good Irish videos and Irish guests here on Find My Past as well, so take a look at our video archive too and look at our great records, and you will get there too. And Karen has Thai, Malaya, Chinese and Burmese relatives to find. They've found DNA cousins, and that's a little bit harder as well, isn't it? That's a little more difficult. But again, there are some records and there are some ways. So do not give up hope, and just make sure you can always keep a space for them in the tree, and it'll be filled eventually. Jim has said, do I have any recommendations to research Italian family, specifically Garibaldi? Well, there was a session we did some time ago about researching Italian ancestors, and I really recommend going back and taking a look at that, because Italian research is very formulaic, and once you get the structure and you understand how it works, then you can get back quite far. So do take a look at that video, because it's quite a long sort of explanation, but it's all very straightforward. So if you can check out that one, it will be really helpful, I think. I think that you will get somewhere. So Italian family is doable. And so definitely add those to your tree as soon as you can. And Alex has said, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History is a good podcast. Dark in places, but the level of detail covered is incredible. He's amazing at finding first-hand accounts, even ancient ones. His series Kings of Kings on the Achaemenid Persian Empire is amazing. I like the bits of history that people don't really talk about so much and we don't learn at school. We talked about the Crusaders, and I know a little bit about the odd crusade that some king was on and things, but the Crusader states were new to me, the Kingdom of Jerusalem and things. Also learning about things like the Babylonians, the Persians and stuff. We don't really cover those in school. We always cover things like the Romans and the Greeks, and that's it. And exactly, that's right. And so I love getting into a new part of history. I know at university I studied a little bit of Chinese history as well, and that was interesting because it was so new and fresh and exciting. And it's definitely interesting to get your teeth into something new. And people have similar sorts of expressions and ways of reacting all around the world, and it's interesting that you can put yourself in those shoes and think, what would I might have done? How would I have been in these different times and places? And of course, also then you can start to think about if you did have ancestors there, what they might have done too. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with history. So it's a really good thing. And also, of course, family historians all tend to be into history as well, because they're all very, very like subjects. And so Victoria said, which video is it for Italian ancestry? And it's back in our video library, the one that we did, this session we did. I think you might have been there, Victoria, but definitely a good one to take back a look at. And so let's see what we've got here, and some more comments as well. The two men and the ginger-haired lady that do historical reconstructions. I'm not sure who they might be. I don't know if anyone can help. Sue, say, well, that might have been. That's an interesting one. And yeah, that's it's good to share all the different ones to look at, though. That's a good thing to share and see what we've got. A few other people with their Irish ancestors being stuck. Andrew always hated history at school because they insisted in teaching about stuff that was irrelevant, like causes of the French Revolution. If you want to get kids interested, look at things they can get. The English Civil War covered the whole of England and spread across the Irish Sea too. That's the thing, I think. I think we're all interested in different parts and times of history. And I think whichever bit that you find exciting, because I didn't know too much about the French Revolution, and I found a few documentaries on YouTube a while ago, and I was so fascinated about things like their 10-day, 10-month calendar and their 10-hour clock and all kinds of, it was so fascinating and interesting. And Napoleon is very, very interesting too. So I leapt at that, but definitely everyone's got their own interesting parts, and if you can find what that is, then everyone's going to take in so much more. So it is a big important thing to get into all of that. We might have to do a lot more social and local history and culture to make sure things are there. After an apparent bar fight over someone my ancestors thought was insulting the Pope. Wow, I think there's half a story there, but that sounds like an interesting one. Wow. Oh, crikey. That's definitely. I mean, you can't go around insulting the Pope, particularly not in Ireland, and that's not going to get you very far. So that's it. And Fia said, "Call the Midwife" is a good show. What life used to be like for mothers having babies. Now they dealt with different health issues. That's true. There are some different things there, different interesting stories that come through. And yes, I definitely like a good historic program, and there are many more to go for, and there's always seems to be one ready to go. I know that some are better than others, but some really go to great lengths to commission historians and other people who can get how things work and things. I know someone that I've been trying to get as a guest on here, which I've not been successful just yet, but maybe soon. They worked on Outlander, and they worked on Bridgerton, and they worked on all this stuff, and they do all the costumes for that, making them historic and going through everything and making sure everything's right. And I remember that they were preparing, if you've seen Outlander, which I haven't watched yet, but I hear it's good, the Battle of Culloden, that was a lot of their work and things, and the costumes and the preparation for all these things, and the detail and the attention that goes into that. Someone who's studied for many, many years to get everything just right and make sure everything is as historically accurate as possible. And even then, sometimes there are some very, very strange ones that are not quite there. And see, we've got Nicole hated history in school, was only interested in Titanic, Jack the Ripper, and bits of the SARS family. Most of my terms were focused on Nazi Germany. After a while, it got boring for myself, and they like the dog as well. Well, there you go, Woody. So you're getting some fans there. So this is the tail waggers for you, Nicole. So that's it. But it is interesting as well. And I think we do study the Second World War quite a lot because it's in living memory, and that's a big thing I remember from youth. But there are other parts of things that are interesting as well. The war from other perspectives is interesting as well. I always try and see things, no matter what you're looking at, whether it's for history, family history, anything, try and see every perspective and every angle, because that can really, really help you understand what's going on and understand what might have changed, what might have gone on. So, for instance, the First World War, I said I'm really interested in that, and I'm really interested in Austria-Hungary and the Italian front. And there are some amazing tales from there that just don't really get studied or looked at in Britain. And I think I might have talked about this before. It's one of my big soapbox moments of the different stories, the great stories of people who are so brave. In one case, there was a Italian battle, and these Italian soldiers were climbing up a hill to an Austrian machine gun post, and they were running to charge this machine gun post. And they were, of course, not getting very far, and they were all being shot by this machine gun post. And wave after wave of Italian soldiers ran at this post, and all were killed. And the Austrian soldiers had a megaphone and shouted out in Italian, "Please stop. No more people need to die. This is senseless. Please don't do it." And these tales are just forgotten outside of some parts of Italy, and it's really important. There were very brave moments, these battles in the Alps and in the mountains around Venice and around just that sort of area in Venezia, where they carried huge artillery all the way up mountains, and they're still there because they're so heavy. They just didn't take them back down again. You can still find them, and sometimes when the glaciers melt like they do in the summer, you'll find new bodies of people who've been there for 100 years, frozen in time. Some brave soldiers would climb the mountains using no safety gear. They would just take picks, and they would climb these mountains to get over and across to these places where soldiers were kept. So definitely it's a very, very interesting part of history to look at, and it's very, very fascinating to take a look. I see Alex has found one of his local pubs back home found a Civil War cannonball in the chimney stack left behind from the Siege of Chester. Given the impact, it's a real shame it's rarely taught. Yeah, Civil War does have a lot of echoes to today. I know Oliver Cromwell is a hero or a villain, depending on who you ask and what's going on. So it's one of those things that you have to see all of it and understand. And I think a lot of people in history are very nuanced, and that they shouldn't really be called one or the other, because they've got so many different facets of their character, and we should understand them all for being complex people who did very bad things or good things, and understand them all individually. Yes, so Linda said they might take a look at the Alps in Italy. That's true. There's a lot to see there and a lot to look at. There's some amazing photographs of these places. You can even take, I think there's like a ski journey where you can come and see them, and you can go and look at all of these abandoned redoubts and things in the Alps as well. And there we go. Francesco's Damosto is one of my favorites looking at Italian history. Some of his stuff repeats on BBC. He's superb. That's good. Linda said there's a follow-on from Outlander, Men in Kilts Touring Scotland on Netflix. I don't know of that one. That's a good one. Margaret can't get enough of Scotland's history. They learned about the Battle of Killiecrankie. And that one is a really interesting one as well. There's lots of little bits of Scotland's history that don't really get studied too much. There's the 1820 Radical War, which I have a relative who was sentenced to death in as one of the leaders. So I'm plenty I could bore you to death about that. It's a really interesting one. But there are some great records on Findmypast about that. The people that were sentenced to death, there were 2 that were eventually executed. They were hung, drawn, and quartered. Some of the last ones to be hung, drawn, and quartered in the country. And the third one was James Clelland, my relative, and he was given a pardon. Well, not a pardon. He was given a reprieve. His sentence was committed to life transportation. He was sent to Australia, where he made a bit of a life for himself. But this was because of an appeal that was written, because there wasn't a court of appeal at this point. And so for anyone who has any ancestors that are sentenced to any serious execution or anything like that, then look at these appeal letters that we have on Findmypast. And all of the tradesmen of Edinburgh had wrote this letter, and it's on Findmypast. You can find it. It's James Clelland, 1820, and they say that he's not a bad guy. He was idealistic. He came back from the Napoleonic Wars. He was a weaver. He joined. He came back and said, "Well, what have we fought for? All of the people live in poverty," and he then got caught up with this and things, so please don't kill him. And you see all of these signatures, and it's a really wonderful original scanned color document, so it's worth taking a look at. It's really, really interesting. And yeah, there's definitely plenty there, and there's lots and lots of interesting bits of history we talk about. Oh, not so much. Oh, okay, yeah. There are some great bits of like European history and other cultural history that I remember going to a place in Czechia called Brno, which is the capital of Moravia, and they have some old legends, which we can hear about these old legends and maybe find the truth in them. And the truth in them can sometimes be more interesting than the tale. And I remember going, and I went with a friend, and we went and had dinner. And we tried to understand with the guy that was speaking to us. I speak a bit of Hungarian, a bit of German, Italian, things like that. And so first of all, I don't speak any Czech, and we tried to speak, and he didn't speak very much English. We sort of got our food ordered in Hungarian, but then in German we had a bit of a conversation, and he kept talking about a dragon. And in Brno, there's a dragon, and someone from the town killed the dragon. And it was an interesting story, and I thought, well, that's strange. Tell me more. And they said, oh, we've stuffed the dragon. He's in the town hall. And that was a thing. We thought, well, that's you don't get to see a dragon every day. What an interesting thing. And so we ran. We barely finished our dinner, paid, and ran to the town hall and found the dragon. And I'll leave you to guess perhaps what it might have been. And I might post a picture on the Findmypast forum or something. Oh, there we go. Woody's off. But yes, the dragon was a crocodile. I don't know where the crocodile came from, but the crocodile was stuffed and was there and had been there for some hundreds of years. So it's interesting how myths and legends can arise from a bit of history, and you can learn a bit of history when you see the dog in the background. I apologize. They were supposed to be nice and quiet, having an investigate. But yeah, you can see that history and see what people think. And the same with lots of myths and legends and things. And they are interesting when you can get to that core and find out what the history of them is. And John has said they're disappointed they weren't encouraged to research our family history when in school. And that's true. I think now there is a family history part of people's education, as from what I remember. But if not, then all of your nieces, nephews, children, grandchildren, definitely try and get them excited. Show them your family tree, talk about certain ancestors, talk to them about what it must have been like for their family at certain points in history that you know they're interested in. All that kind of thing can really help to make history come to life. And that's why people get into family history, when they can say, well, what did my ancestor do at that particular point in history, which is really, really a big thing. And it can help a lot. And they say, Linda said, yes, the crocodile only needs wings to be a dragon. That's true. That is part of the issue. And I think that's maybe what they might have come from, what they might have thought. So it is a big one. And let's see. We've got some more things there. Janina said, my dog is upstaging me. His name is Woody, but he's decided he wants to go for a walk. So what I thought would be nice and calm and quiet has just changed. I'm sure you can hear breathing and scampering if you go around. There's some interesting things as well in all these various different pubs and things, because pubs often have I know you mentioned this cannonball, but pubs tend to sometimes be around for a long time, passing from generation to generation. So there are a number of different places that have been around for centuries. There's one in Ireland, and I can't remember where it is, so I might be able to tell me. And I know I've talked about it before, which is, I think it's over 1,000 years old, this pub, and the original walls are wattle and daub underneath. So they are a big thing. So really, really interesting and really worth taking a look at. So there we go. Dog's gone for a walk, and that's good. But yes, definitely that history that you can see in the places that are around us. There we go. Let's get back to normal. Now the dog has disappeared. In our last 10 minutes, we can focus a bit more. Angel said the Brazen Head in Dublin. I'm not sure. I have to check. I think it was somewhere else. It might have been in Wicklow or Carlow or somewhere, if I remember. But I will try and find out and get back to you. But yes, and Ali has said she added a new grandson to her family tree this week, born on Wednesday. Congratulations, Ali. That's a really great thing to hear about. That is a really big thing to add a new node to your family tree, a new person, and it's great to see it growing downwards and across as well. I know I've got some pregnant cousins as well. I'm looking forward to adding some more people to the family tree. It's always a happy moment of celebration when that happens. Anya's saying the one in Nottingham's great, the ye old trip to Jerusalem. I know there's the ye old trip to Jerusalem, and there's the ye old salutation in as well in Nottingham. There are a few of them, and they all claim to be old. And I think there's a bit of a competition between a few pubs around England that are supposed to be the oldest pubs in Britain. And I think the ye old trip to Jerusalem has some caves and things. It was supposed to be a Crusader stopping point, wasn't it? And I don't know if that was proven to be true or false or anything, but I'm sure there'll be some more knowledge. Christina said, how clever is a dog to open the door himself? Well, he might have had help, so don't worry. So Brazen Head in Dublin claims to be the oldest pub in Ireland. I'll take a look. It might be the one. I'm not sure, but I will find out and see. Kira or Kyra, tell me if I've got your pronunciation right, because I, of all people, as Myko should do, it's right. Picked up an interesting photo in a shop in Padua of a military family of Austrian soldiers from the Battle of Asiago. There are lots and lots of little artifacts in places around Italy and Hungary and Germany. Sometimes you'll find these strange little markets. They do it in France as well quite often, where people in the town will almost dig out their attic and put things on a tablecloth, and you can just buy things and barter with them and get all kinds of things. And so that is something that's really worth looking at. You can pick up some really interesting finds there. And so very, very fascinating indeed. Fees had one of their cousins had their first child in the last few weeks. Congratulations, Fee, as well. John is in Wicklow, and that pub doesn't ring any bells. I might be wrong. I will find out, and I will make sure. So, yeah, maybe the one in Dublin is the one I'm thinking of, but I will find out, because I can see it in my head, but I can't remember the name, but I will find out. But this one I remember is about 1,200 years old, so I will find out and come back to you. And yes, Alex is saying Chester's got some amazing old pubs. Used to have a spud you like, where you could eat your spuds alongside an 1,800-year-old hypercourse. I remember that place, actually. I can remember. I didn't know that was a hypercourse, but I remember walking past it and remembering that was very, very old. So, well, now I've learned something new. That's great. I find it really fascinating when they integrate old stuff with new stuff, and they do it a few times. There's actually an Aldi in Croatia, in Split, I think, which takes part of a Roman building, and you can actually go and shop for your vegetables and your fruit and your meat and veg and everything inside this piece of Roman history, which is really interesting. And in Venice. I remember going a long time ago and seeing another, I think it was an Aldi as well, but in a Venetian, it must have been a stately home of some kind or some palazzo. And they had all of these frescoes and things all over the top, and nicely painted dioramas of angels and all kinds of stuff on the ceilings and things, and columns. And they were selling Kinder Easter eggs as well. So they were on special offer. It was a very interesting, strange juxtaposition. It shows us really, I think, the history is all around us all the time. And Lloyd has made a suggestion, let's visit all the Irish pubs to find out which is the oldest. A field trip for the weekend, who can bring the dog. Well, that would be another interesting Find My Past tour. I think maybe we should maybe look into that in more detail, some kind of Find My Past history walk, maybe in some different cities and things. I did do a walk around London once with a friend. We did a history walk. That was quite good. And there's definitely some scope in Edinburgh and around Scotland. So I'm sure we could come together with something and have a little Find My Past holiday when everything's all allowed. Linda's asked, are there records showing families of servicemen returning to the UK via ships? Great grandmother made her own way in 1899 to be with her husband in the West Indies. He was with the Royal Engineers, but you can't find a return record for her with 2 children in 1905. So I'm not too sure, because I know that my grandmother is in the records of ships, records of people coming back to the UK, but I'm not sure when they start. I think they do. They are around from about the 1870s, I think, if I'm right. But definitely they're in the 1900s and you're right at the turn of that. So there are lists of passengers that do arrive. And if it's a commercial ship, they definitely will be. But there may also be civilian ships that were full of wives and children in the military. Just from the one example that I have, I know I found in there. So take a look at those kind of records and you might be lucky, Linda. So that's one. Athlone, that's the one, Andrew. It's Athlone where the pub is that's claiming the title. So maybe that claim is wrong. We'll have to look into it. So I'm glad that we're all there. We're all getting there to jog my memory for this trip and this wild ride that we have on a Friday. And it's interesting. So Chantal's made a good point. In Canada, we did a lot of family history stuff in regards to our culture because there's so many different cultures on the prairies, or learning about the settlement of Western Canada. It's part of the elementary school curriculum to learn that history, but I wish later in junior high and high school, they would have encouraged more family history research. It's interesting as well to think about what came before and who was there. So I know in Canada and the United States, there are all kinds of amazing native cultures that are all kinds of complex and interesting and fascinating, and left some great artifacts and even cities that are worth looking at and very interesting to see. I remember at the Valley of Fire in, I think is it Nevada or Utah? I think it's Nevada. Yeah, the carvings of these cultures as they travel through and things, they're really interesting to look at and really fascinating to see. And it shows there's all kinds, no matter where you are in the world, there's some great expression of culture and art and poetry and joy that people bring into life. And it's the same because people are the same wherever they are. And, we find records, we find out who they are, but we know kind of who they are because they're like us. They are us, and all the things that make us happy, all the things that we dance to. We listen to music on the radio. They may have sung and hummed themselves. They might have played a small instrument, a little flute or something. The options are incredible, but the inspirations and the ideas are the same. And they are really inspiring to know that we could stand in the same place as our ancestors and think the same things they do, but just with slightly different cultural references, slightly different clothes, different hairstyles. And we're closer to them than we believe and that we remember. And sometimes it's nice to bring that home. And when we think about these places and these things, like I'm fascinated about certain places that seem very old, and you go there and you can almost scrunch your eyes up and imagine you're back in time and think, well, actually, if I were, no one would say anything about it. I would look the same. There would be no difference. And so it really brings home that our culture and our people are just, we are our ancestors in so many different ways. So it is very, very interesting. Jill, we've got Jim has asked, where will I find the old videos you've made here? So all the videos are on the Find My Past page and on the Find My Past YouTube channel. All of these are stored. You can go back, you can watch whenever you want. You can view at your leisure, look for different topics, different things you've got of interest. So Alex has posted a link there, very, very useful for everyone to see. YouTube.com there, great place to look. and lots of great videos, inspiring things from all over the world, all over the family history space, everything there. And I see even in the comments, we can see a lot of dispute about what the oldest pub in Britain is. So the Black Horse at Limerick and Chorley is older than the ones in Nottingham. I think there are 5 or 6 that all claim to be the oldest. And I don't know if we'll ever solve that mystery, but it is fascinating to see a very old building in an old place. I know in Shrewsbury, where my family have been, there are some great old Tudor buildings as well that are really interesting to look at. And those old black and white frontages are really interesting too. And especially as Alex talks about Chester, there's a lot around there as well. And it's great to see something that's preserved so long, a lot of halls. I'm sure I remember one when I used to grow up, I used to get off the bus next to or near a hall like that. I didn't really pay much attention to. And now I think I'm going to, after this video, go and look and see whether that's still there and still around and what's going on. Matthew's asked, is there a video on newspapers? It would be a great one. There are a few, I think. And I think Mary McKee did quite a good one relatively recently. So take a look for that. And that would be very, very helpful. And I think another comment I've just seen coming from Matthew, you're never far from history, places, buildings, or people. History, not just family history, is all around us. And I think that's a good way to round things off. I think that it's true. We're surrounded by history. We're surrounded by family history. We're surrounded by each other in this wonderful Find My Past Friday. It's great to come together and talk. And every week we do it. And I know Alex and Jen and Mary and everyone else that does this, Paul, all enjoy our time with you. And they all enjoy sharing their knowledge and hearing what you've got to say and finding out about your family journey as well. So do keep coming back and telling us about that too. Join the Find My Past forum and tell us more and ask questions if you have any tips that you need. And definitely go and keep working on that family tree, find some great new things and tell us what you found. Always try and make sure that I do a bit of family history research every week, whatever it is, even if it's just correcting a name or checking a record or something. So if you do and you find something great, do so. Tell us, come and tell us how we go and see where we go. But yes, that's it. We're at the end of our hour, and it's so easy to keep talking because it's so easy to talk about family history and all the things that get us excited. And I'm really glad that you chose to spend your time with us today. And I hope that you've enjoyed yourself, and I really hope to see you again. And definitely stay tuned. There'll be more broadcasts next week and the week after, and we'll keep going. And we're really happy that you're with us, and we hope to see you many, many times as well. So thanks a lot, and see you later on. Have a good weekend.